Hey guys, so I was talking with Michaela about, oh man, I don't have any content for Monday and I haven't been reading and I don't know what I'm doing. And you may have seen Michaela's last video where she was also like, well, I haven't been reading, I don't know how to make content. And I was like, excellent, we can both just sit in this hole together. And then Michaela was like, well, why don't you do the try a chapter tag? And I was like, the hem. And so that's what I'm going to do today. So for all that Michaela does not, she was like, I don't know what to do. She like set me up on what to do. So even if she's not making videos, she is still like the brains of the operation. Don't let her fool you. Also, I have it on authority that Michaela read an entire book last night. So, maybe we just both need to be around and just go, hi-ya! At each other. That was a high kick you couldn't see because of the camera angle, but that's fine because I'm wearing really fuzzy polar bear pants. Professional on top, nap time on the bottom. You can't tell. So I have crafted this pile of books right here from my aggressively too many books that I own and haven't read with some specific theories in mind. And I'll introduce the books, then I'll read all the chapters, and then I'll tell you all about them. But the idea behind them for most of them is that these are the first books in series that I have, either like the next book, it might just be a duology, it might be a longer series. Some of them I have the whole series, some of them I just have the sequel. And with some of these, they might be familiar if you watch my Trapped in My e-reader TBR, because some of these are first books that I then have an e-copy of the second one. So I thought this would be a really awesome time to check out the first book and see if I can get started on the series and then also read the second book off my e-reader. So the first book that I'm going to look at is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Maherin. I think that's how you say the last name there. This is the ARC. I got this ARC at BEA back in, 2019. And one of the reasons that I picked it up, I didn't meet the author, but it was on a table and I flipped it over because on the back it says, a steamy YA series launch perfect for fans of Sarah J. Maas. And as you know, Sarah J. Maas is kind of like my magic word. If I'm like, oh, like that, then I will take it. I've also seen this series like everywhere. There are people who have really strong feelings about it. And the back of it says that it's about a girl named Louise who gives up her magic when she escapes her coven and fled to a city patrolled by people who are basically like, witches should die. So that seems like a smart life choice that she's made. But then she tricks one of the city's witch hunters into a public scandal, and the two are forced to get married. That's gonna go well. So it's a little bit of, enemies to lovers with some fantasy elements, but it's YA, and those are a lot of really, really big buzzwords for me. And I also, like I said, have the follow-up book in this series on my e-reader, so it hits a lot of buzzwords, and so I'm cautious that this might work for me. From an author that I know nothing about to an author that I know that I have loved in the past, this is Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. This is again an ARC that I did not read, so if you're like, the actual cover is way cooler than that, yeah, that sometimes happens with ARCs. This is the first in a series again, and I have the second book on my Kindle, my e-reader, because I was like, I know that I love Julie Kagawa and I have the first book, so let's just get the second book. And the second book also has the really fun cover on it, although it's moot because it's an e-reader. Anyway, this says, enter the enchanting and perilous lands of shapeshifters and samurai, kami spirits and Japanese legends. Every 1,000 years, the great kami dragon will grant one wish to whoever holds the scroll of 1,000 prayers. The pieces of this scroll have been scattered across the earth and people go to find them. So it's based on Japanese myths, folklore, mythology, and it's got, a quest to find the pieces of the puzzle. This is a fairly basic fantasy plot that I really love. I'm into the quest fantasy, and there's also two people who have to then work together. Wonder what's gonna happen to them. I bet you it's gonna be romance. Another book in this pile by an author I absolutely adore is The Beautiful by Renee Audia. I own, in some capacity, every book Renee has written. You can normally see behind me The Flame in the Mist and The Smoke in the Sun are down here. The Wrath in the Dawn and The Rose and the Dagger are here. This is her latest series. It's book 1 in another duology. The second book is The Damned. This was essentially pitched to me as Twilight, but diverse and better written world building style. It takes place in 1872 in New Orleans, and like I said, diverse vampires. Her first 2 books, or book series, really dealt with the mythology of other countries, Persia, and then Japan/China/Korea. That book was specifically a melting pot. I used her in my thesis, so I have thoughts. So I need to read this. Can't have used her in my thesis and not have read this book. Speaking of authors whose series that I have that are completely finished and I can sit down and read the entire thing right now, this is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I don't know if you need to say more than Holly Black writing books about fairy. Like, that's kind of her thing. She's just an amazing writer, but her thing is like her book set in fairy or about fairies. And that's what this series is, and I own the entire series. She's a local author, so most of them are autographed, but I haven't read one yet, so, you know, oops. This is Stormcrow by Kaylin Josephson. This is another book where I have the second one on my e-reader, and I mean, I picked this up literally just because of the cover. Like, I mean, y'all can see that, and it's gorgeous. And I will be honest, I'm not sure I've ever actually read the back of this because I was like, look at it, it's so pretty. I honestly haven't seen all that many people talking about this on the internet but I did meet the author, it's signed. We'll see what happens when I read the first chapter. And then finally, because Chain of Iron just came out and I got it, but of course I haven't yet read Chain of Gold. This is the newest Cassandra Clare series that she's writing on her own. This one, Chain of Gold, is the first book in the Last Hour series, which timeline-wise is set after her Infernal Devices, but before the Mortal Instruments. This is the kid of the main characters in Infernal Devices, and I feel that her Infernal Devices series is better than the Mortal Instruments. So I'm excited to go back to this version of her world that's set a little bit, you know, more in the past. Mortal Instruments is set in the present. Although I love me some Malik, so I'll read the Malik books like crazy, but whatever. So I need to see if this is the moment where I finally start actually reading this series. I'm gonna go read, and I'll see you guys in a bit. For me, for you, in like a second. Hey, much shock, I'm back. So I read the first chapter, so the first chapter of Chain of Gold is a prologue set several years before the book actually starts, but the first chapter is like really long, so I just stuck to the prologue. And what it does is give a really strong characterization of Lucy Herondale, who's one of the main characters of this book, but it is also her as a kid, and she's like reimagining Snow White, but she's, you know, a strong, active princess and not just, I'll fall asleep and wait for someone to kiss me without my permission, which is great. And she meets a strange boy in the woods, and then it says, you know, and then it was 10 years before I saw him again, which is the actual start of the book. One of the things that has gotten, I think, better in Cassandra Clare's books is the characters and their family relationships. That's really seemed to be growing for her as the books have gone on. So I like that it starts out with a strong character relationship, but doesn't super get the plot started for me. So I can't say that it made me any more or less interested in starting this than I was previously. Stormcrow also has a prologue, but the prologue is really actually a chapter. I don't quite know why it says prologue. There's also not really a time jump. There's a little bit of one between it and the first chapter. I just read a few lines just to try to see what relation it had. But anyway, in this story, there's a main character, a girl named Anthea. Her people are shockingly, crow riders. They ride these magical crows called storm crows, and it's just about the night where she picks her storm crow, who will be her crow for life. She's also the princess of this country. And I know, I literally turned to Michaela's over here on the computer, and I was like, oh good, she's also the princess. Super. I don't know why that's my feeling about this, but it is. There's a lot of world building going on really fast, and I don't really like that normally in my books. At the end of the prologue, all of the crows also get like burned to death, so that's cool. A lot of bird murder, and she does not get to pick a crow because they're all dead. And then in the few lines I got of the opening chapter, in order to strengthen their country or like sign a truce with the people who killed the crows, maybe, Anthea has to marry the prince of the other nation. So it's a really, really cool idea, but it just like, it set off so many tripwires for tropes for me that I think out of this pile, like, just, you know, between this one and this one, I would not read this. I would read the Cassandra Clare book first. So when I started this video, I joked to Michaela, I was like, wouldn't it be funny if all of them just had prologues and I actually wasn't reading a first chapter? Prologue number 3 comes from The Cruel Prince, and actually what's really, really funny is that chapter 1 is actually only one sentence. It's, in Fairy, there were no fish sticks, no ketchup, and no television. So in this case, chapter 1 is worse than the prologue. The main character of this book is Jude. She has a twin sister and an older sister, Vivi. They live with their parents in the beginning prologue of this book, but then a strange tall man shows up and claims that their mom is his wife who ran away from him. He appears to be a fairy, although it's not clear. And when their mom doesn't want to go back with him, he's like, time to die. And then he kills both of their parents at sword point. Come to find out, Vivi is actually his kid, and he says that as, you know, their stepfather, question mark, he has to take care of them all, so he takes them all back to Fairy with him. I'm really intrigued by the idea. I feel like normally you would get, you know, Jude as the main character would be, you know, his heir or whatever, but she's not. She's just like a total human brought along because Vivi is actually her half-sister. So I'm really intrigued by that idea. I like it, and I'd be very curious to see where this goes. So this has worked out for me in this case. All right, so once again, this had a really, really short opening. This is, the beautiful, first of all, starts off with two quotations, not just one, two. One of them is by William Blake, and one of them is by perhaps a French poet of some kind, Marceline Desbordes Valmore. I butchered that, it's fine, I don't speak French. I always find it weird when they start off with more than one. Like, could you not make your point with just the one? Why are there two? And then the opening part of this is literally just a page and like a part. And this is in the first person. And I believe it's from the perspective of Celine, who is the main character, but it is not clear. And then it switches to third person for the actual first chapter, which is about Celine and her friend Pippa on the ship from England and arriving in New Orleans. And it seems that Celine is an orphan, and she has come to be matched with a husband by some Ursuline nuns, which sounds like a great life choice. And she and Pippa are, of course, just very nervous about starting their whole life here. You know, I think I would have maybe felt better had it just started with this chapter about Pippa and Celine, because the end of this like weird first person bit goes, and I will always be the shadowy creature in darkened alcoves waiting, ... for you, my love, for you. And I'm like, but why is this so dramatic? Why? Why is this here? I mean, it's wonderfully written. I love Renee's writing, but it's just between the two poetry quotations and then this really bizarre opening. It just feels weird to me. That's all I gotta say. So if you remember when I read you like the back part of this, there were two people involved in this questy thing in the Shadow of the Fox, and their names are Yumiko and Tatsumi. The first chapter of this is about a girl named Suki who goes to work at the Imperial Palace for a very nasty concubine named Lady Satomi. And she, of course, meets one of the princes and falls head over heels with it. Like, this is one chapter. This is not the plot of the book, I should stress. She goes to work for this lady who's very abusive and very terrible. She falls for a prince because he plays the flute beautifully. Insert dirty joke there if your head is in the gutter, as mine is. And then Lady Satomi kidnaps her and feeds her to a demon. That's chapter 1. And then, but it says at the end that like her soul turns into a little ball and like flies away. So I assume that the piece of Suki's soul will be lodged in one of the main characters. I don't know that for sure, but I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure whole books have been written about literally just the plot of the first chapter in this. So, wow, that was an adventure. I don't know if like it makes me more or less interested in reading it, but this book does not come to play. Like, things are happening. Okay, so Serpent and the Dove did not start off the way that I thought it was going to. It turns out that Louise, who is the one who gave up her magic, fled her coven, blah, 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 is like way more badass than previously appears. She's on the hunt for some kind of ring, and she like tracks down somebody in a brothel, and it's a thing. Like, she has a partner in crime named Coco, and she also did not come to play, and I really enjoyed that. And I have to say, when I read the back and then saw Perfect for fans of Sarah J. Maas, I was like, what about this? Is because Sarah J. Maas, one of her famous YA series is about a female assassin, and I was like, what about this? Is comparable to Female Assassin? Is this just ad? Might be more true than I thought. So very interested in this one as well. It did not start at all the way that I thought it was going to. So out of my stack of 6 here, I think I'm most interested in reading either The Cruel Prince or Serpent and Dove. We will see if I read any of these, because once I walk away from here, my brain might go, eh. But, you know, maybe I'll just have to do this again. Nobody knows. But thanks for hanging out with me. If you have read any of these, of course, the first chapter is only one way to take a look at what these books are or aren't. So if you've read any of these, let me know your comments. Let me know if you think that my ranking is right, or if I should give one of these another chance. Help me out, because I'm in a rut and I would like to not be in it. I've been having a hard time reading fantasy. That's why these are all fantasy, because I love YA fantasy, but I've just been struggling with it and I'd like to get back to it. So give me a hand, shout out in the comments, let me know, and maybe you'll see a review for one of these in the future. Or not. This is Betwixt the Books. Who the heck knows? Thanks for hanging out, guys. Bye.